Hello, listeners. This is Kat. Welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfic. This will be the continuation of Fall Apart, Collect the Pieces. This will be Part 2, Chapters 3 and 4. Chapter 3. As soon as the door clicked shut behind her, Izuku sank back onto the couch, drained, shocked. Deku? Kachan called, kneeling in front of him again. Izuku looked up at him, mind reeling, and then it seemed to click into place. She hadn't just sold his things. His notebooks had been thrown in the trash, every thought he'd had, ranging from quirks to tactics to gear to his most private thoughts, thrown in the recycling. As terrifying as it was, as dangerous as it could be, the merch collection hurt more. His thoughts could be repeated. His carefully curated museum of hero history probably couldn't be. The merch hadn't even been sold at the proper value to reputable collectors who were guaranteed to take care of them. How many of his things had ended up in a donation bin? How many posters were crumpled and torn beyond repair? How many boxes were damaged? Had the incomplete merch sets made it to auction, or were they carelessly tossed into the pile and lost forever? Would some random person's kid rip the arm off the last action figure his dad ever gave him? Had she rolled up or folded the poster that night I had willed to him, damaging it forever? He thought about the pin that he'd been so excited to add to his set, the literal years that he'd kept an eye out for it, wasted. Deku. Katsuki called again, gripping his wrist. Izuku focused on his eyes, burning red and filled with concern, and burst into tears. Kachan tugged him forward and wrapped his arms around his shoulders. When she brought it up, she didn't even ask why it was important, he sobbed. I thought she'd let it go. She's a piece of shit, Deku, Kachan replied, rubbing his back. We'll do what we can to get it back, all right? First thing tomorrow, we'll hit all the thrift stores in the district. Izuku's face twisted further. There are so many, he cried. Not to mention all the other donation bins she must have dropped them in. So we get help, Katsuki replied, hugging him a little tighter. Fuck yeah, that's a great idea. Izuku tried not to whimper when Katsuki pulled away. What are you doing? He asked when Kachan pulled out his phone. Gonna call the idiots, he explained. They can come help out. With what? He asked miserably. I thought we were gonna do this tomorrow. Yeah, but tonight we can go through the dumpster and clear his shit out of the house, and fuck, it'll be good to have them around for support or whatever, he suggested with a weak smile. Even around the hurt, he was so grateful for Kachan. This wasn't his strength, but he was here. Solid, steadfast support. He swallowed thickly. You think they'd help? Katsuki frowned. Why wouldn't they? Izuku's eyes darted around, taking in the walls he'd considered secure just hours ago. What if they think it's childish? He asked quietly. Maybe I'm just overreacting for kicking her out. Kachan, wait! He'd already hit call. With the phone pressed to his ear, he turned a reprimanding glare on Izuku. That's bullshit, Deku. She knew who you were before you fucking married her. She shouldn't have tried to change you, and she shouldn't have taken that shit that's important to you. Only you can decide who you are, and anyone who doesn't accept you doesn't deserve to be in your fucking life. If you were cooking meth or some shit, that would be different, but what the fuck took you so long, Pinky? He bellowed into the phone. Izuku could hear Mina whining on the other end. Kachan, maybe? Shut the fuck up for a sec. You called me, he heard Mina bellow. If you don't want him here, I'll hang up. We can search and pack her shit while we watch a movie or some shit, but as annoying as they are, they're damn good at lifting the mood. Katsuki held his gaze, as Izuku thought it over, waiting patiently while Mina audibly ranted through the tiny cell phone speaker. Izuku swallowed again, the lump in his throat constricting. His lip trembled. If I change my mind, I'll kick them out myself, Kachan replied. On the other end, Mina went quiet, probably listening. Eventually, he nodded and Katsuki gave him a smirk, the closest thing he had to an encouraging smile. Go take a shower and change out of your costume, he instructed. I'll fill the dipshits in. Thanks, Kachan, he murmured. Katsuki backed up so that Izuku could skirt around him. Hey, Kachan grabbed his wrist again. We'll figure it out, all right? Shit might not be perfect, but I've got your back. Izuku mustered up a weak smile, teary and wobbly. I know, Kachan. You always do. He passed the home theater on his way to the master bedroom and stopped in the doorway. God, maybe he was being dramatic, but it felt like someone had died. Or a piece of him had died, or something. He just knew this felt like grief. Like his soul had been scraped out with the goddamn melon baller and thrown in the garbage. The notebook with All Might's autograph was in a recycling bin or a landfill somewhere. The physical reminder of the moment his idol had saved his life was probably waterlogged and covered in trash. That's what his interest amounted to, according to his wife. Trash, nuisance, worthless, a waste of time and space. She'd always known about his interests. Is that what she thought of him as a whole? That she wanted to chip away at him until he was picture perfect? until all the things that made him unique were gone. He'd worked hard to be unashamed of who he was, and the idea that Ochako had wanted to take even one part of it from him made him feel sick. It made him angry. The stupid home theater was staring him in the face, and his hands ached from how hard they clenched. He'd started dating Ochako 5 years ago, right after he and Katan had opened their agency together. That stupid pastel popcorn machine stood where the vintage Pro Hero video games had been displayed. Their first date had been at a cat cafe. Those couches had been paid for with his dreams. She'd told him that his passion for heroics was inspiring, that he could connect to people because of the genuine enthusiasm he showed, that she'd fallen for him because of how he looked at the world, optimistic and excited. He'd fallen for her because she was bright and supportive and because he'd never had to set himself on fire to keep her warm. Apparently, she'd just been waiting to light the match for him, waiting to strip away the parts of him she didn't like when she thought she had him tethered, waiting to replace his hard-won collection with a shitty home theater with too much light and no personality. He heard glass shatter and startled back. He'd picked up the popcorn machine and thrown it against the wall without realizing it. The sound of it breaking felt like a dam bursting. And suddenly, he wasn't just mad, he was furious. Then, he was ripping the flat screen off of the wall and throwing it across the room, and ripping the couch cushions to shreds. He sobbed as he kicked the stupid hardwood TV stand until it splintered beneath his feet. He smashed the bowl of potpourri onto the floor, and ripped the stupid, mass-produced movie posters from the walls. He felt ineffective and powerless. She'd waited until he was gone. She'd planned this, and he'd been an idiot to trust her. She'd just felt so fucking trustworthy. They'd been through so much together. Loving her had been as easy as breathing. The only other person he'd ever felt this much for would never do something like this. Not now, at least. Not now that they were grown, and had grown together. Now that their friendship was unbreakable, he'd never do this to Izuku. They loved each other. Not like that, but no less valid. He used to dream of Katan loving him the way he thought Ochako did. Loving him was like a heartbeat, always there, and completely involuntary. An immutable fact, and he knew that Katsuki loved him too. As he stood in the wrecked room, silent, angry tears rolling down his face, he knew for a fact that Katsuki would never do this. People who loved each other didn't do this. They didn't take the things that mattered from each other and ruin them. They talked, learned, and compromised. If she'd asked, he would have compromised, invested in an actual storage space or added another room to the house or scheduled designated date nights or something. He would have done it, but she hadn't asked. His hands ached. "Feel better?" Katsuki asked quietly. Izuku turned to find him leaning against the doorframe, surveying him calmly. "No," he replied, scowling through his tears. "Now I can't return any of this shit." Katsuki barked out a surprised laugh. "I'll reimburse you, or we can get Ponytail to make extra replicas." "She doesn't like messing with the economy," Izuku replied dryly. She'd make an exception. He knew she would. He still didn't want to bother her with the consequences of his temper tantrum. "Maybe," he muttered. Katsuki stepped into the carnage, skirting splintered wood and decimated couches to take him by the shoulders and steer him toward the door. "Shower, Deku. I'll order dinner. The dumbasses will be here in a half an hour." Izuku nodded, even hollower than before, completely sapped of whatever energy he'd had left. He stepped under the spray and slumped against the tiled wall, crying louder than before. Chapter 4. When he finally made it out of the shower, his eyes were red-rimmed and he only felt tired. He could hear Tenki and Mina in their living room. They weren't yelling, but they definitely weren't using inside voices. They sounded angry. He couldn't help but wonder if they were mad at him, if they thought he was being immature for collecting in the first place. He pulled on sweatpants and a t-shirt, anxiety seeping under his skin. He'd thought that even if Ochako didn't understand it, she'd come to accept it. She'd been his wife. He'd thought that he could trust her with all of him. And if he couldn't trust her with all of him, how could he trust them? He heard Katan's low growl, and some of that anxiety ebbed. Katan trusted them. He wouldn't let them stay if he didn't. With that in mind, he braced himself and made his way to the living room. He stood in the doorway listening. "Wait, what about the vintage Titan Star lunchbox?" Denki asked, sounding miserable. Izuku's eyes welled up again. Denki had gotten that for him on his 20th birthday. Titan Star was a hero from Daigoro Banjo's era the fifth user of One For All. She'd been one of the first heroes to be a commercial success, as well as a kind-hearted, impactful savior. Her merch was rare, old, and overshadowed by All Might's overwhelming presence. It was amazing that Denki had even found it, let alone given it to him. To a true hero fan, it would have been nearly priceless.
She didn't leave anything behind, Kachan snapped. If she didn't find a WeBay buyer for it, it's sitting in a donation bin somewhere.
Poor Mito, Mina lamented. She was scowling. That's so messed up. Do you remember the day he got that Bronze Age figurine in the box? The way he ran into the room with it held over his head like a trophy?
He loved that one, Eiichiro agreed, arm over Mina's shoulder. She brought it up a couple times. Izuku flinched, eyes flicking toward the kitchen counter. Hitoshi was there, propped up on a bar stool. I thought she dropped it after our last talk. Sue asked why it mattered as long as Izuku was happy, and she shrugged it off. He must have come with Denki. Didn't fucking matter what made him happy. She'd already decided she didn't like it, so she fucking trashed it, Katsuki snapped. Hanta spoke up then, hesitant. I hate to be the person who takes it away from Mito being hurt, but those notebooks? That shit is bad news. I was fine with it when they were safe with him, but out there? Katsuki nodded. Yeah, not fucking good. His eyes flicked to the doorway, catching his. Can't believe she just threw them out, Mina yelled, making Izuku flinch. Even if they weren't filled with sensitive information, those were his journals. Katsuki held his gaze. She barely looked through them. She decided they were junk and threw them out. She didn't care about anyone but herself. He heard it loud and clear. She didn't care about him, at least not as much as she cared about her picture-perfect vision of what he should be. She just let Izuku believe that she did. Hey, guys, he murmured, finally stepping into the room, all eyes swiveled to him. Thanks, he swallowed, looking down at his feet. What are friends for, right? Mina replied. He glanced up and melted a little at her gentle smile. She looked sad. He hated making his problems other people's problems. Ochako was one of Mina's closest friends. I know you're all friends with her, too. You don't have to. Dude, what she did was super messed up, and she doesn't think she did anything wrong. I feel like I barely know her, Denki said, uncommonly somber. We may be friends, but if that's how she treats people she cares about, it's time to reevaluate. Besides, being friends with her doesn't preclude being here for you, Mina stated firmly. You're the one that's hurt, and you're the one that needs help. We can deal with Ochako later, Hitoshi agreed. He was already tired of crying. It was quieter now, tears slipping down his face as he nodded. All right, thanks, he replied. Dipshit, Duct Tape, and Walking Dead are gonna go search the dumpsters. The rest of us are gonna go help you pack up her shit, Kachan explained. Izuku's stomach twisted. He had no idea how long ago she'd thrown the notebooks away. It could have been a week ago, or it could have been yesterday. If it was the former, they were already buried in a landfill. Thank you, guys, but I don't know how long ago she threw them away. Hitoshi cleared his throat uncomfortably, drawing Izuku's gaze. We may be able to find out. There was something in the way he said it that made him a little sick. What do you mean? Hitoshi shifted, looking guilty. I think she asked Shoto to help. I asked him if he wanted to go to that new noodle place by his agency since I was in the area, and he said he was helping Ochako for the day. His stomach dropped. He knew? He asked. It felt like a slap in the face. Shoto had bought some of that merch for him, mostly to piss Endeavor off, but it had still meant a lot. Maybe Shoto hadn't realized the significance to him. Maybe when Izuku had been 18, buying him the limited edition miniature Might-mobile at auction was acceptable, but now that he was 25, he thought it was juvenile. He wondered if Sue and Tenya felt that way too. Sure, Sue had apparently said it was harmless, but that didn't mean that she didn't think it was juvenile or invalid. Tenya had once said that his obsessive journaling could make him look disturbed to the public. He swallowed, gritting his teeth. Could you ask him? Had he helped move the furniture in, or had he helped throw his things out? I don't want you to go dumpster diving for stuff that isn't there. Sure, Hitoshi agreed. I'll talk to Tenya and Sue too, all right? I'll take care of it. Maybe you should eat first, Denki suggested. You just got back from a mission. His stomach growled. He hadn't even noticed. The constant nausea at his situation seemed to have masked his hunger. Sure, he said, traipsing over to the couch. Can we talk about something else? Do something else while we eat? I'm just overwhelmed, miserable, shocked. Of course we can, dork. Hatsuki scoffed. Sit down. Sparkplug brought pizza because nutrition doesn't mean shit to him. I brought it because it's comfort food, you ass, Denki huffed, throwing a pillow at him. Why aren't you bitching at Mina for ice cream? Because Mina eats her fucking vegetables, Katsuki barked back. Hitoshi had slipped away into one of the other rooms, and Izuku was left with Katsuki and his friends, handing him pizza and ushering him to the couch. Katsuki put on a movie, a pre-quirk superhero movie that talked a lot about the trust and care that went into being a team, before sitting down next to him. He loved this movie. This series had helped build his heroic philosophy outside of All Might's influence. His favorite parts of the movie came and went, but every time Izuku opened his mouth to give commentary, he'd bite it back. Why would they want to hear it? Inane background chatter that wouldn't have any impact. He could feel Kachan's concerned gaze on the side of his face. Halfway through the movie, Hitoshi trudged back into the room. He looked tired. "Hey," he said as Kachan paused the movie. The phone was still in his hand. Shoto wants to come over to talk. So does Sue." "Are you fucking kidding?" Katsuki snapped. "Hell no." "Dude, they sound pretty upset," Hitoshi replied. "They didn't know." "They didn't know what? That they were making changes to the house without Mito's permission?" Mina demanded. Kachan threw an appreciative glance. "Or that the room they were remodeling used to contain all of Deku's most important shit," the blonde barked. "Let them," Izuku said, voice tight. Katsuki made a noise of protest beside him. "No. Really. I want to hear it. And if it's not good enough, I want my house key back." "You're getting your fucking locks changed." "The gesture means something. Only people I trust have one." Katsuki had one. Shoto had one. Hitoshi had one. Ochako had one. That was it. Hitoshi raised the phone back to his ear. "You heard that?" he asked. "Good." He hung up without another word, and Katsuki hit play. As the rest of the group settled back in, Kachan gave his shoulder a little nudge, a silent show of support. His anxiety grew as they waited, unable to fully focus on the movie, knowing that Shoto and Sue had something to do with a lifetime collection disappearing. He'd thought they knew him better. When Hitoshi let them in, Mina stood. The movie wasn't done yet, but they weren't paying attention anyway. "If it's okay with you, A and I are going to start going through everything and pulling Ochako's things out," she said. "You can help us sort it out later." "And I'll start working on clearing out the theater room," Hitoshi said. "Denki?" "Yeah, coming," he said, hopping off the couch. "There are work gloves in the hall closet," Izuku said, tone still dull. "You'll need them." Denki and Hitoshi shared a concerned glance. Katsuki must not have showed them the damage that he'd done to the room. "Want me to go too?" Katsuki asked. Izuku shook his head immediately. Shoto and Sue were standing at the entrance, looking like they were waiting for an invitation. He didn't want to be alone with them. Hanta grabbed the plates and pizza boxes and carried them into the kitchen, busying himself with cleaning. The four remaining heroes stared at each other, unsure of where to start. Finally, Suyu spoke up. "I think we're both confused about what happened," she admitted. "Could you explain the situation from your point of view? And then we'll explain what we were told." Izuku's eyes fixed on her, and she flinched. He wondered if he looked as awful as he felt. His eyes were sore from crying, so they were probably red and swollen. Then, he explained. He explained that Ochako brought up the collection twice, once asking if he wasn't too old for it, and another saying they should get rid of it. He said no both times because it was important to him. She seemed to drop it, and never asked anything more. He left for his mission. When he got back, everything was gone and the home theater was in its place. When Ochako came home, she'd said she'd sold, donated, and thrown his stuff away. No permission, no warning, just gone. As he spoke, both of them grew paler, sneaking glances at each other. "She told you that?" Suyu asked. "That she sold and donated it?" "And trashed your notebooks?" Shoto piped up. He looked sick. "What did you think she was going to do with them?" Katsuki snapped. "Dip it in gold and display them in the fucking Hero Hall?" "At least at the Hero Hall. It was a museum where it would be taken care of, rather than in a recycling bin." "The way she talked about it, it sounded like a daily argument you guys had over the past month," Suyu explained. "She told us that you'd compromised." Shoto nodded in agreement. "She told us that you had agreed to keep your collection and notebooks in storage so that you could turn the space into something shared," he continued. "So you just packed up his shit without even asking him if he was actually okay with it? What kind of fucking friends are you?" Katsuki snarled. Izuku put a hand on his knee, holding him in place. "We didn't touch the collection," Shoto insisted. "She called us on Wednesday to ask us for help since Tenya had patrol all day." "She said you'd already packed up your collection before you left, and she wanted to set up a theater while you were gone as a surprise," Sue said. So they hadn't packed his stuff up. It had been gone by the time she'd told them. "But you thought she was right for wanting to get rid of it all?" he asked, voice small. "That I was being childish?" Suyu fidgeted, but Shoto didn't. "No," he replied. "I was hoping you'd find a way to spread it through the house a little more. Made me happy to see how much you liked the gift I gave you. You knew so much about it as soon as you saw it. It clearly made you happy." I spent my whole childhood being deprived of things that made me happy, so I didn't want that for you. It didn't hurt anyone, and we deal with awful things every day. If collecting makes life better, you should collect. And when Ochako said you compromised, I thought she'd at least put it all in a storage facility so that you could still enjoy them. I thought it was a reasonable middle ground, so I didn't look deeper. I should have, though. I'm sorry. He sounded frustrated, voice quiet and ashamed. Their eyes turned to Sue. She shifted under their gaze. I'll admit I don't understand the collecting thing, Sue said. It wasn't hurting anyone until recently, when I truly thought you were starting to prioritize the collection above Ochako. She started complaining about it every time I saw her, and I was honestly upset with you. I thought it was... She trailed off, croaking uncomfortably. Immature of you to let it affect your marriage. That's not what happened, though. Katsuki growled through gritted teeth. She nodded, looking down. I know that now. I should have gotten your side of the story, but I barely see you lately, and with Ochako's story... You figured that I neglected my friendships for it, Izuku uttered, wounded. She flinched, but powered through. Sometimes, the way you talk about it, it comes off as obsessive, she explained. And I wondered if you'd gotten trapped in a sort of fixation. I didn't get why you needed the stuff in the house if it was causing problems, so when we got together for drinks a few weeks ago, I suggested that maybe, instead of getting rid of everything, you could get one of those fancy storage units with the temperature control to store them. I thought she'd brought it up with you, and you'd come to an agreement. Izuku felt cold, racked with the ugly sort of hurt where it felt like you were in danger, so all the blood in your body left your extremities to power your bleeding heart. Katsuki, on the other hand, was livid. Deku gives everyone his all the time. He's the most selfless motherfucker on the planet. Kachan. No, Deku. He gives his fucking life up for people. So what if he has a fucking hobby? He's not allowed to have one thing for himself? Sato collects fucking cake pans. Are you gonna tell Pony to donate his shit to a bakery? You're right, she said, contrite. I should have talked to you too, or minded my own business. I should have done better. I didn't understand why it meant that much. Katsuki snarled. I don't understand why men have fucking nipples, but you don't see me cutting off. Izuku put his hand back on Katsuki's knee to silence him. Izuku looked up at her, lip trembling. It meant a lot to me, because when the world told me I couldn't be a hero, those notebooks and collectibles helped me keep dreaming. They helped me keep learning and growing when I had no one in my corner, he explained quietly. And then, it reminded me that there were people who supported me, who saw me and loved me for exactly who I was. I never thought I'd have that. They were gifts and relics and pieces of history that I looked to remind myself of where I was and where I am now, to remind myself of all the people who love me and think about me, to hold the people I've lost close to me. Izuku, Tsuyu breathed. Everything in that room was a part of me, he interrupted. Those notebooks showed my growth over more than a decade, and how many friends I've gained. Some of it was gifted to me by All Might before he died. Some of it by my own parents and friends. Some of it is from a specific era that marked spectacular moments that I got inspired by. It's always been who I am, and I got comfortable enough to share it. You didn't have to understand it, but you did have to respect it. I'm sorry, she uttered. I helped hurt you, and I am so sorry. What can I do? Izuku shrugged listlessly. It's all gone. I'm going to try to get some of it back, but the trash gets taken out Wednesday, so the notebooks are gone. The donated stuff is probably in thrift stores around the city. Pieces of my life are just missing. So I appreciate your apology, but I think you need to go. She swallowed and nodded. I understand, she said. If you need anything from me, please let me know. She turned to leave, but paused. You might want to talk to Tenya. I couldn't get a hold of him earlier. Oh, I'll be talking to Glasses, Katsuki snarled beside him. Sue nodded, then left. Izuku didn't know he'd ever feel open with her again. He felt like a piece of his heart was dying, the piece he'd left open for her. If you'd like me to leave too, I'd understand, Shoto said, eyes fixed on the floor. But if not, I'd like to help find your things. Izuku swallowed. The lump in his throat had been there for so long that it ached. I'd appreciate your help, Izuku said. But I need my house key back. I know you thought you were helping, and I appreciate what you said, but you still violated my trust, and I need time. Shoto nodded, already pulling out his keys and working Izuku's house key off its ring. Please let me know how I can help. Izuku looked at Katsuki, and, like always, the blonde seemed to know exactly what he was thinking. He's going to need one more thing, Katsuki said slowly, turning burning eyes back to Shoto. Izuku took a deep breath,
This step made it real. I need your mom's divorce lawyer. All right, listeners. This concludes Chapter 4 of Fall Apart, Collect the Pieces. Chapter 5 will be next. I hope you guys are enjoying this so far. Let me know your thoughts and reactions, and as always, thank you so much for listening.